Jonathan Hayes pushed open the heavy glass door of a small diner tucked away on the edge of town. The bell above the door jingled softly, announcing his arrival. He stepped inside, pulling the brim of his baseball cap lower over his face. It wasn't often that he ventured out like this, out of his chauffeured car, away from his luxurious penthouse, and into places where people didn't recognize him or care about who he was. Tonight, though, he wanted to be someone else entirely. The diner smelled of grease and freshly brewed coffee, a comforting aroma that reminded him of simpler times. Rows of booths lined the walls, their red vinyl seats slightly cracked with age. A few patrons sat scattered throughout the room, chatting quietly or staring blankly at their phones. Behind the counter, an elderly cook flipped burgers on a griddle, steam rising around him like a cloud. The place had a lived-in charm, the kind you couldn't buy no matter how much money you had. Jonathan slid into a booth near the back, choosing a spot where he could observe without drawing attention to himself. He ordered a cup of black coffee from a passing waitress and leaned back against the seat. For years he had wondered what it would feel like to live like everyone else, to work hard every day just to scrape by, to worry about bills instead of board meetings. As the CEO of Apex Innovations, one of the largest tech companies in the world, he rarely got the chance to think about such things. But tonight, disguised as an ordinary guy, he hoped to gain some perspective. As he sipped his coffee, his eyes wandered around the room. Most of the staff seemed friendly enough, exchanging jokes and smiles with the customers. One waitress, however, caught his attention. She moved quickly between tables, balancing trays laden with food. Her dark hair was tied back in a messy ponytail, and her uniform, a plain white shirt and black apron, looked like it had seen better days. There was something different about her, something that set her apart from the others. Maybe it was the way she carried herself, with a quiet determination, despite the obvious fatigue etched across her face, or maybe it was the fact that she barely spoke unless spoken to, focusing intently on her tasks as if they were all that mattered. Her name tag read, Mia, printed in bold letters next to a smudged logo of the diner. Jonathan watched her closely, intrigued. She didn't seem unhappy exactly, but there was a weight to her movements, a heaviness that suggested she was carrying more than just plates of food. Every now and then she'd pause for a moment, leaning against the counter or resting her hand on the back of a chair, as if gathering strength before diving back into the chaos. Time passed slowly as Jonathan lingered in the booth, nursing his coffee long after it had gone cold. The diner began to empty out as the dinner rush ended, leaving only a handful of stragglers finishing their meals. The staff started cleaning up, stacking chairs and wiping down tables. Mia worked alongside them, moving methodically through the space. When the last customer finally left, the manager locked the front door and turned off the neon sign outside. Everyone else headed toward the break room or the exit, eager to leave the long shift behind. But not Mia. Instead of grabbing her coat and heading home like the others, she lingered by the kitchen. Jonathan frowned, curious about what she was doing. He watched as she glanced over her shoulder, checking to see if anyone was watching. Then, hesitantly, she opened the lid of one of the large trash bins near the prep area. His stomach tightened as he realized what she was looking for. After a moment, she pulled out a half-eaten sandwich wrapped in wax paper and a few stray fries from the garbage. Without hesitation, she unwrapped the sandwich and began eating, standing right there in the middle of the empty diner. Jonathan felt a lump rise in his throat. He couldn't look away. Here was this young woman working tirelessly all evening, only to resort to scavenging for scraps once the doors were closed. It was humbling and heartbreaking. He knew hunger existed in the world. He'd seen statistics and reports about poverty rates and food insecurity. But seeing it play out right in front of him, in such a raw and unfiltered way, hit him harder than any report ever could. For a moment he debated whether to say something. Should he confront her, offer help, or should he simply let her be, respecting her privacy even in this vulnerable state? Before he could decide, Mia froze, sensing movement behind her. She turned sharply, her eyes widening when she saw him still sitting in the booth. Embarrassment flooded her features and she instinctively took a step back, clutching the remains of the sandwich tightly in her hands. I didn't mean to, she stammered, clearly embarrassed. Her voice trailed off, unsure of what to say next. Jonathan stood up slowly, raising his hands in a gesture of reassurance. It's okay, he said gently, keeping his tone calm and non-judgmental. I'm not here to cause trouble. Mia relaxed slightly but remained guarded. What do you want? She asked, her voice tinged with defensiveness. Just to talk, Jonathan replied. He gestured toward a nearby table. Can we sit for a minute? She hesitated, glancing toward the exit as if considering making a run for it. Finally, after a long pause, she nodded reluctantly and followed him to the table. They sat across from each other, the silence between them heavy with unspoken questions. Jonathan broke the ice first. Why did you do it? He asked softly. Why did you take food from the trash? Mia looked down at her hands, avoiding his gaze. For a moment he thought she might refuse to answer. Then in a voice so quiet he almost missed it, she began to speak. Because I don't have a choice, she admitted. My mom's sick and the medical bills are piling up. I've been working 2 jobs just to keep us afloat, but it's never enough. Sometimes I can't afford to eat, so I take whatever I can find. Her words hung in the air, raw and honest. Jonathan listened intently, feeling a mix of emotions, guilt, admiration, and a deep sense of responsibility. This young woman, barely older than his own daughter, was fighting battles most people couldn't even imagine. And yet here she was, showing up to work every day, putting on a brave face and doing everything she could to survive. You shouldn't have to do that, Jonathan said finally, his voice firm but kind. No one should. Mia shrugged, trying to appear indifferent, but he could see the cracks in her armor. It is what it is, she muttered. Life isn't fair. No, Jonathan agreed, but maybe it doesn't have to stay that way. Before she could respond, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a wad of cash. It wasn't much, just a few $100s, but it was all he had on him. He placed it on the table between them. Take this, he urged. Use it to buy groceries or pay your bills, whatever you need. Mia stared at the money, stunned. I can't accept that, she protested weakly. You don't even know me. I know enough, Jonathan replied. And trust me, it's not charity. Think of it as an investment in someone who deserves better. After a long moment of hesitation, Mia reached out and took the money, her fingers trembling slightly. Thank you, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. I'll pay you back someday, I promise. Jonathan smiled faintly. Don't worry about paying me back, just focus on taking care of yourself and your mom. With that, he stood up and walked toward the door, leaving Mia sitting alone at the table. As he stepped outside into the cool night air, he couldn't shake the image of her eating from the trash. It haunted him, not because it was shocking, but because it was real. And for the first time in a long time, Jonathan Hayes felt truly alive, not as a billionaire CEO, but as a human being connected to the struggles of others. The next morning, Jonathan Hayes sat at his desk in the penthouse office of Apex Innovations. The sun had barely risen, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink outside the towering glass windows. But Jonathan wasn't admiring the view. Instead, his mind was consumed by thoughts of Mia, the young waitress he'd met the night before. He couldn't stop replaying the moment when she pulled food from the trash bin, her face etched with shame and desperation. It was an image that refused to leave him alone. He leaned back in his chair, rubbing his temples as if trying to erase the memory. But no matter how hard he tried, it lingered, gnawing at him like a persistent ache. For years, Jonathan had prided himself on being a compassionate leader, someone who cared about more than just profits and stock prices. Yet sitting there in his luxurious office, surrounded by reminders of his wealth and influence, he realized how disconnected he truly was from the struggles of ordinary people Sure, he donated money to charities and attended fundraisers, but none of that felt real. Not compared to what he'd witnessed last night. Determined to do something meaningful, Jonathan picked up his phone and dialed a familiar number. After 2 rings, Claire Bennett, his trusted assistant, answered. "Good morning, Mr. Hayes," she said cheerfully. "What can I do for you?" "Claire, I need your help with something personal," Jonathan began, his voice serious. "There's someone I want you to look into, a young woman named Mia Dawson. She works at a diner called Joe's Place on the outskirts of town." Claire paused, surprised by the request. Normally, Jonathan asked her to research business competitors or potential investors, not random individuals. "Of course," she replied cautiously. "Do you have any specifics? Like why you're interested in her?" Jonathan hesitated, unsure how much to reveal. "Just dig into her background," he said finally. "Find out everything you can about her financial situation, family, anything that might explain why she's struggling so much." Claire didn't press further. Over the years, she had learned to trust Jonathan's instincts, even when they seemed unusual. "I'll get started right away," she assured him. "Anything else?" "No, that's all for now," Jonathan said, hanging up the phone. As soon as the call ended, he returned to staring at the photograph he'd taken secretly the previous night. It showed Mia rushing between tables, her face focused yet weary. Seeing her frozen in time somehow made her plight feel even more urgent. Over the next few days, Claire worked tirelessly to gather information about Mia. What she uncovered painted a picture of resilience and hardship. Mia lived with her mother, Linda Dawson, who suffered from chronic illness and required expensive medication to manage her condition. Their modest apartment was located in a low-income neighborhood, and despite Mia working nearly 80 hours a week, splitting her time between the diner and a late-night cleaning job, they were barely staying afloat. To make matters worse, predatory loan sharks had targeted them, threatening legal action if they didn't repay mounting debts. When Claire presented her findings to Jonathan, he listened intently, his jaw tightening with each new detail. By the end of the report, he felt a mixture of anger and admiration. Anger at the system that allowed such injustice to persist, and admiration for Mia's determination to keep fighting despite overwhelming odds. That evening, Jonathan found himself unable to concentrate on work. He paced the length of his office, his mind racing with possibilities. How could he help Mia without making her feel like charity? He knew offering her money outright wouldn't solve the root of the problem. It would only provide temporary relief. No, he needed to think bigger, more creatively. An idea began to form in his mind, one that combined his resources with Mia's potential. What if he could create an opportunity for her to escape the cycle of poverty on her own terms? Not as a handout, but as a chance to prove herself and build a better future. With renewed energy, Jonathan grabbed a notebook and started jotting a list of ideas. Meanwhile, Mia continued her daily grind, unaware that someone powerful was quietly orchestrating a plan to change her life. Each day brought its own challenges. Long shifts at the diner, sleepless nights scrubbing floors at an office building, and constant worry about whether they'd be able to afford rent or groceries. Despite the exhaustion, she remained determined to care for her mother and hold on to hope, however faint it might seem. One particularly grueling afternoon, Mia arrived home after finishing her shift at the diner. Her feet ached, and her head throbbed from lack of sleep. As she unlocked the door to their tiny apartment, she heard her mother coughing weakly from the bedroom. Dropping her bag on the couch, Mia hurried inside, finding Linda pale and shivering under a thin blanket. "Mom, are you okay?" Mia asked, placing a hand on her forehead. It was burning hot. "I'm fine, sweetheart," Linda croaked, though her voice betrayed the severity of her condition. "Just tired." Mia frowned, knowing better than to believe her. "You're running a fever," she said firmly. "I'll call Dr. Patel and see if we can get you an appointment tomorrow." Linda shook her head weakly. "We can't afford another visit, Mia. You know that." Tears welled up in Mia's eyes, but she blinked them away quickly. She hated feeling powerless. hated seeing her mother suffer because they couldn't afford proper care. Taking a deep breath, she forced a smile. "Don't worry, Mom. We'll figure something out. Just rest for now." As Mia tended to her mother, feeding her soup and adjusting her blankets, she allowed herself a rare moment of vulnerability. Sitting beside Linda's bed, she let the tears fall silently, mourning the life they deserved but could never seem to reach. For years, she had carried the weight of their struggles alone, refusing to burden anyone else. But lately she'd begun to wonder if she could keep going like this indefinitely. Unbeknownst to Mia, Jonathan was already putting pieces into place to lighten her load. Back in his office, he finalized plans for a new initiative within Apex Innovations, a program designed to empower underserved communities through education, employment opportunities, and affordable housing solutions. While the project aimed to benefit countless families, Jonathan intended to use it as a stepping stone for Mia specifically. He envisioned her taking charge of the outreach efforts, using her first-hand experience to connect with others facing similar hardships. He believed she had untapped leadership skills and a natural ability to inspire trust, qualities that made her uniquely suited for the role. All she needed was a chance to shine. By the end of the week, Jonathan had drafted a formal proposal outlining the program's goals and structure. He scheduled a meeting with his executive team to present the idea, knowing it would require significant funding and resources. But he also knew it was worth it, not just for Mia, but for everyone who deserved a fair shot at a better life. As the presentation drew near, Jonathan couldn't help but feel nervous. This wasn't just another business venture, it was deeply personal. If successful, it could transform lives, including Mia's. And if it failed, well, he didn't want to consider that possibility. On the day of the meeting, Jonathan entered the boardroom with confidence, his heart pounding with anticipation. One by one, he addressed his team, laying out the vision for the outreach program and explaining its potential impact. When he finished speaking, the room fell silent. For a moment, he feared they wouldn't support the idea. Then, slowly, applause broke out, followed by nods of approval. "You've really thought this through," remarked Sarah, the CFO, breaking the silence. "It's ambitious, but I think it could work." Others chimed in, offering suggestions and feedback. By the end of the discussion, the team agreed to move forward with the project, allocating the necessary funds and personnel to bring it to life. Jonathan left the meeting feeling a sense of accomplishment he hadn't experienced in years. This wasn't just about business anymore, it was about humanity. Later that night, as Jonathan prepared to leave the office, he glanced once more at the photograph of Mia. A small smile tugged at the corners of his lips. He didn't know exactly how things would unfold, but one thing was certain. He was committed to helping her rise above her circumstances, because deep down, he knew she deserved nothing less. And perhaps along the way, he might learn a thing or two about what it truly meant to lead, not just a company, but a movement toward compassion and change. The days following the boardroom meeting were a whirlwind of activity for Jonathan Hayes. He spent hours refining the details of the outreach program, ensuring every aspect aligned with his vision of empowerment and support. But even as he worked tirelessly on the project, his thoughts kept returning to Mia. How would she react when she learned about the opportunity he wanted to offer her? Would she trust him enough to accept it? These questions weighed heavily on his mind. After consulting with Claire, Jonathan decided the best approach was to reach out directly. He couldn't risk scaring Mia off by sending someone else or making the situation seem too formal. Instead, he chose a simple, low-pressure setting, a local cafe known for its cozy ambiance and privacy. It wasn't far from the diner where they'd first met, which felt fitting somehow. With Claire's help, Jonathan tracked down Mia's phone number through her work schedule at Joe's place. Calling her felt strange, almost intrusive, but he reminded himself that this could change her life. Taking a deep breath, he dialed the number. After a few rings, Mia answered, her voice cautious and guarded. "Hello," she said, her tone wary. "Hi, Mia, this is John," Jonathan replied, using the name he'd introduced himself with during their encounter at the diner. "We met a few weeks ago, remember?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. Yeah, I remember, Mia said slowly. What do you want? I'd like to talk to you about something important, Jonathan explained. It'll only take a few minutes, and I promise it's nothing bad. Can we meet tomorrow afternoon at the cafe on 5th Street? Mia hesitated, clearly unsure whether to trust him. Why should I meet you? She asked bluntly. You already gave me money once. I don't need more charity. It's not charity, Jonathan assured her quickly. This is about an opportunity, an honest chance to improve your situation. Please, just hear me out. If you don't like what I have to say, you can walk away, no strings attached. For a long moment, there was silence. Then, finally, Mia sighed. Fine, I'll meet you. But if this turns out to be some kind of trick, I'm leaving. Fair enough, Jonathan said, relieved she hadn't outright refused. See you tomorrow at 2. The next day, Jonathan arrived at the cafe 15 minutes early, choosing a table near the window where he could watch for Mia. As he sipped his coffee, he rehearsed what he planned to say, hoping to strike the right balance between honesty and encouragement. When Mia walked in, he immediately recognized her despite the fatigue etched into her face. She scanned the room briefly before spotting him and approaching the table. Hey, she said, sliding into the chair across from him. Her posture was stiff, her guard still firmly up. So, what's this about? Jonathan smiled warmly, trying to put her at ease. First, let me say thank you for coming. I know you're busy, so I'll get straight to the point. He leaned forward slightly, his expression serious but kind. I've been working on a new initiative aimed at helping people in tough situations. People like you. It's a program designed to provide education, job training, and affordable housing, solutions to underserved communities. Mia frowned, confusion flickering across her face. That sounds great, but why are you telling me this? Because I think you're exactly the person we need to lead it, Jonathan said simply. Mia blinked, caught off guard. Wait. What? Lead it? You barely know me. I know enough, Jonathan replied. You're hardworking, resilient, and compassionate, qualities that make you perfect for this role. Plus, your experiences give you insight into the challenges these families face. Who better to guide them than someone who's lived through similar struggles? Mia shook her head, disbelief written all over her features. I appreciate the thought, but I'm not qualified for something like that. I don't have any fancy degrees or experience running programs. You don't need those things, Jonathan insisted. We'll train you, support you every step of the way. All you need is the drive to make a difference, and I know you. Have that? She looked down at her hands, twisting them nervously in her lap. For years, Mia had dreamed of escaping the cycle of poverty, of finding a way to build a better future for herself and her mother. But opportunities like this didn't come knocking on her door. They belonged to people with connections, education, and privilege. People like Jonathan. I don't know, she murmured, her voice tinged with doubt. What if I mess it up? What if I'm not good enough? Jonathan reached across the table, placing a reassuring hand over hers. Mia. Everyone doubts. Themselves sometimes, even me. But here's the thing. You won't be doing this alone. You'll have a team behind you, ready to help whenever you need it. And honestly, I believe in you more than you might believe in yourself right now. His words struck a chord deep within her. No one had ever spoken to her like that, with such conviction and faith. Slowly, she raised her eyes to meet his, searching for any hint of insincerity. All she found was genuine compassion and determination. What would the job involve? She asked cautiously, curiosity beginning to outweigh her skepticism. Jonathan leaned back, sensing he was making progress. You'd oversee the outreach efforts, working directly with families to understand their needs and connect them with resources. You'd also help organize workshops, partner with local organizations, and advocate for policy changes that benefit the community. It's a big responsibility, but I think you're capable of handling it. Mia chewed her lip thoughtfully, weighing the pros and cons. On one hand, this was a chance to break free from the endless grind of minimum wage jobs and debt. On the other hand, accepting meant stepping into unknown territory, trusting a near stranger to follow through on his promises. How much does it pay? She asked finally, practicality overriding her hesitation. Enough to cover your expenses and then some, Jonathan replied. Plus benefits including healthcare coverage. For you and your mom. We'll also assist with relocating closer to the office if needed. Mia's heart raced. Healthcare coverage? Relocation assistance? These were luxuries she'd never dared to dream of. Still, she forced herself to remain cautious. And what's the catch? There has to be one. No catch, Jonathan assured her. Just a commitment to work hard and make a positive impact. That's it. She studied him for a long moment, trying to gauge whether he truly meant what he said. Finally, she nodded slowly. Okay, I'll do it. But if this doesn't work out, I'm walking away. That's fair, Jonathan said, smiling broadly. Welcome aboard, Mia. I promise you won't regret it. As they shook hands to seal the agreement, Mia felt a spark of hope ignite within her, a feeling she hadn't experienced in years. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't constantly fighting just to survive. Maybe, just maybe, things were finally starting to change. Unbeknownst to Mia, Jonathan felt a similar sense of optimism. Watching her agree to take the leap filled him with pride, not just for her courage but for the ripple effect her success could create. This wasn't just about helping one person, it was about proving that empathy and action could transform lives. Over the next few weeks, Mia dove headfirst into her new role, attending training sessions, meeting with advisors, and learning the ropes of managing a large-scale initiative. At first, she struggled to adapt, overwhelmed by the scope of her responsibilities. But with Jonathan's guidance and unwavering support, she gradually gained confidence, surprising even herself with her ability to rise to the challenge. Meanwhile, Jonathan continued to observe Mia's progress, marveling at her resilience and dedication. Each milestone she achieved reinforced his belief that true leadership came not from titles or wealth, but from understanding and empowering others. Together, they were building something extraordinary, a bridge between privilege and struggle, hope and despair. By the time Mia officially took charge of the outreach program, the transformation in her demeanor was undeniable. Gone was the weary waitress who scavenged for food in trash bins. In her place stood a confident, driven young woman ready to make a difference. And as Jonathan watched her address a crowd of eager participants during the program's launch event, he realized he had gained something invaluable too, a renewed sense of purpose. For both Mia and Jonathan, this marked the beginning of a journey neither could have anticipated, a journey fueled by compassion, determination, and the unshakable belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could lead to extraordinary outcomes. Months passed, and Mia Dawson thrived in her new role leading the outreach program. What had started as a daunting challenge quickly became her life's mission. Every day brought fresh opportunities to connect with families facing hardships, similar to those she had endured. She listened to their stories, shared her own experiences, and worked tirelessly to provide them with resources that could change their lives, affordable housing options, job training workshops, and access to medical care they otherwise couldn't afford. Under Mia's leadership, the program grew faster than anyone expected. Families who once felt invisible now had a voice thanks to her relentless advocacy. Local organizations began partnering with Apex Innovations, amplifying the impact of the initiative. News outlets picked up on the story, praising the innovative approach and highlighting the tangible results. Dozens of families lifted out of poverty, children returning to school, and parents finding stable employment. Jonathan Hayes watched it all unfold with quiet satisfaction. He attended meetings, reviewed progress reports, and occasionally offered advice. But he made sure to step back and let Mia take full ownership of the project. It wasn't easy for him. His natural instinct was to micromanage. But he knew this was her moment to shine. And shine she did. Watching her transform from a struggling waitress into a confident leader filled him with pride unlike anything he'd ever experienced. One evening, Jonathan received an invitation to a gala celebrating the success of the outreach program. Hosted by a prominent nonprofit organization. The event aimed to honor individuals making significant contributions to social justice and community empowerment. To his surprise, Mia's name appeared alongside his on the list of honorees. When Claire informed him about the recognition, he smiled softly, knowing how much it would mean to her. Mia deserves every bit of this, he told Claire. Make sure she gets the spotlight tonight. On the night of the gala, Jonathan arrived early, dressed in a classic black suit that exuded understated elegance. As guests mingled in the opulent banquet hall, he stood near the back of the room observing quietly. His eyes scanned the crowd until they landed on Mia, who entered moments later. She wore a navy blue dress that complemented her features perfectly, her dark hair styled neatly around her shoulders. Though she looked nervous, there was a quiet strength in her posture, a testament to how far she'd come. When it was time for speeches, Mia stepped up to the podium, gripping the microphone. With both hands, the room fell silent as she began to speak, her voice steady despite the sea of faces staring back at her. "Thank you all for being here tonight," she said, her tone warm and sincere. "I never imagined I'd stand where I am today. Not because I didn't dream big, but because my reality often felt too heavy to carry. For years, I worked multiple jobs just to keep food on the table and medicine in my mom's cabinet. Some nights, I went to bed wondering if things would ever get better." She paused, glancing briefly at Jonathan before continuing. "Then something changed. Someone believed in me when I didn't believe in myself. That someone gave me a chance, not out of pity, but because they saw potential in me. Because of that chance, I've been able to help others find hope and stability in their own lives." The audience erupted into applause, moved by her honesty and vulnerability. Jonathan felt a lump rise in his throat as he listened to her words. He hadn't realized how deeply she understood the significance of his actions, or how profoundly they had impacted her. After Mia finished speaking, another speaker introduced Jonathan, inviting him to join her at the podium. Reluctantly, he walked to the front of the room, aware that all eyes were now on him. Standing beside Mia, he felt a strange mix of pride and humility. "When I first met Mia," Jonathan began, his voice calm but heartfelt, "I saw someone fighting against impossible odds with unwavering determination. I knew then that she was extraordinary, not because of her circumstances, but because of how she responded to them. This program isn't my achievement. It belongs to Mia and the countless families whose resilience continues to inspire us." He turned to Mia, smiling warmly. "You've taught me more than I could have imagined, Mia. Thank you for reminding me what true leadership looks like." Tears glistened in Mia's eyes as she nodded, overwhelmed by his words. The audience erupted into applause again, this time louder and more enthusiastic than before. Cameras flashed, capturing the moment for newspapers and social media platforms across the country. Later that evening, as the celebration wound down, Jonathan found Mia standing alone near one of the large windows overlooking the city skyline. She cradled a glass of water in her hands, looking thoughtful. "How are you feeling?" Jonathan asked gently, joining her by the window. Mia smiled faintly, though her gaze remained fixed on the horizon. "Like I'm living in a dream," she admitted. "Everything feels surreal. Like any second I'll wake up and none of this will be real." "It's real," Jonathan assured her. "You earned every bit of it." She turned to look at him, her expression softening. "I wouldn't be here without you, John. You saved me, not just with money or opportunities, but with belief. No one's ever done that for me before." Jonathan shook his head. "Don't give me too much credit. You saved yourself. All I did was open a door. You're the one who walked through it." For a long moment they stood in silence, reflecting on the journey that had brought them to this point. Neither of them could have predicted how their lives would intersect, or how profoundly they would influence each other. "Do you think we can keep doing this?" Mia asked finally, her voice tinged with hope. "Helping more people, reaching further. Can we really make a difference?" "We already are," Jonathan replied firmly. "And we're just getting started." As the night drew to a close, Jonathan realized something important. This wasn't the end of their story. It was only the beginning. Together, They had created something remarkable, proving that compassion and action could transform lives in ways neither of them had imagined. Outside, the banquet hall reporters gathered, eager to capture sound bites and photos of the honorees. But inside, amid the laughter and conversations, Jonathan and Mia shared a quiet understanding. They were no longer CEO and employee, benefactor and recipient. They were partners in a movement fueled by empathy, determination, and the belief that even the smallest acts of kindness could lead to extraordinary outcomes. And as they stepped into the spotlight together, ready to face whatever came next, they knew they weren't alone. Behind them stood thousands of families whose lives had been touched by their efforts, and ahead lay endless possibilities for growth, change, and impact. In that moment, Jonathan Hayes and Mia Dawson weren't just changing individual lives. They were rewriting the narrative of what it meant to lead, to serve, and to truly care. The success of the outreach program continued to grow, spreading far beyond what Jonathan Hayes or Mia Dawson could have imagined. What started as a local initiative quickly gained national attention, inspiring other cities and organizations to adopt similar models. News stories highlighted the lives transformed by the program: families who had escaped homelessness, children returning to school, and adults gaining skills that allowed them to secure stable jobs. For Mia, this was more than just a job. It was proof that hard work and compassion could create real change. One afternoon, several months after the gala, Jonathan called Mia into his office. She entered cautiously, unsure why he wanted to see her. Over the past year, their relationship had evolved from mentor and mentee to something closer to equals working toward a shared goal. Still, whenever Jonathan summoned her, she couldn't help but feel a flicker of nervousness. "Close the door," Jonathan said with a warm smile, gesturing for her to sit across from him. His desk was cluttered with papers and files, but one item stood out: a framed photograph of Mia speaking at the podium during the gala. Seeing it made her heart swell with gratitude. "I've been thinking about something," Jonathan began, leaning forward slightly. "You've done incredible work with the outreach program. Honestly, I don't think anyone else could have achieved what you have in such a short time." Mia blushed, shaking her head modestly. "It's not just me. Everyone on the team has worked so hard. Plus, you gave us the resources and support we needed." "That's true," Jonathan acknowledged. "But leadership matters, and your leadership has been exceptional." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "Which brings me to why I asked you here today. I want to take things to the next level, for you and for the program." Mia raised an eyebrow, intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I'm stepping back from my role as CEO of Apex Innovations," Jonathan explained. "Not completely. I'll still oversee major decisions, but I'm handing over day-to-day operations to focus on expanding the outreach program nationwide, and I'd like you to lead that expansion." Mia stared at him, stunned. "Lead it? Nationwide? Are you serious?" "Completely serious," Jonathan replied, his tone firm but encouraging. "Assert count. You've proven yourself time and again. You understand the challenges these families face because you've lived them. That gives you a perspective no one else can replicate. I trust you to carry this forward." For a moment, Mia was speechless. The weight of what he was asking sank, and slowly. Leading a nationwide initiative would be a massive responsibility, one that required skills and confidence she wasn't sure she possessed. Yet deep down, she knew this was the opportunity she'd been waiting for. It was a chance to make an even bigger impact, to reach people who desperately needed help. I don't know what to say," Mia admitted finally, her voice trembling with emotion. "This is huge. What if I mess it up?" Jonathan chuckled softly. "You won't. But even if you stumble along the way, that's okay. Growth comes from challenges. Besides, you won't be doing this alone. You'll have a team supporting you every step of the way, including me." Tears welled up in Mia's eyes as she processed his words. This wasn't just another promotion. It was validation of everything she'd fought for. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice thick with gratitude. "I won't let you down." "I know you won't," Jonathan said with a reassuring nod. Now go home and think about it. We'll start planning once you're ready. Over the following weeks, Mia threw herself into preparing for the nationwide rollout. She traveled to different cities, meeting with local leaders and learning about regional challenges. Each trip reinforced her belief in the program's mission while also reminding her how much work lay ahead. Despite the pressure, she felt alive in a way she never had before. For the first time, she truly believed she was making a difference, not just for herself but for countless others. Meanwhile, Jonathan used his influence to rally support for the expansion. He reached out to politicians, philanthropists, and corporate partners, securing funding and endorsements that would ensure the program's sustainability. Watching Mia rise to the occasion filled him with pride, but it also sparked a personal transformation within him. Inspired by her resilience, he reevaluated his priorities, shifting Apex Innovation's focus toward ethical practices and community engagement. As the launch date approached, Jonathan decided it was time to reveal his true identity to Mia. They had built a strong partnership, but he realized she deserved to know the full truth about the man behind the hoodie. One evening, after a long day of meetings, he invited her to dinner at a quiet restaurant downtown. When they arrived, Jonathan hesitated before speaking. "There's something I need to tell you," he said, his voice unusually serious. "Something I should have told you a long time ago." Mia frowned, sensing the gravity of his tone. "What is it?" He took a deep breath, removing his baseball cap and running a hand through his hair. "My name isn't John. It's Jonathan Hayes. I'm the CEO of Apex Innovations, the company funding the outreach program." Mia's jaw dropped, shock washing over her features. "Wait, what? You're the CEO? Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "At first I wanted to earn your trust without the baggage of my title," Jonathan admitted. "Later I worried it might change how you saw me, or worse, make you feel indebted. But now, as we move forward together, I think it's important you know the whole story." For a long moment, Mia sat silently, processing the revelation. Then, unexpectedly, she laughed, a mix of disbelief and amusement. "All this time I thought you were just some guy trying to help, and you were actually the billionaire CEO." "I prefer to think of myself as someone who cares," Jonathan said with a wry smile. "Does this change anything between us?" Mia shook her head, her expression softening. "No. If anything, it makes me appreciate everything you've done even more. You didn't have to help me. You chose to. That says a lot about who you are." Relief washed over Jonathan's face. "Thank you for understanding. I hope this doesn't make things awkward." "Not at all," Mia assured him. "In fact, I think it's kind of funny. Who would have guessed that the guy who caught me eating from the trash bin would turn out to be one of the most powerful people in the country?" They both laughed, breaking the tension. As the evening wore on, they talked openly about their hopes for the future, not just for the program, but for themselves. For Mia, leading the nationwide initiative represented a chance to redefine her life's purpose. For Jonathan, stepping back from Apex Innovations marked a new chapter focused on giving back rather than accumulating wealth. By the time the nationwide rollout launched, the story of Jonathan Hayes and Mia Dawson had captured the nation's attention. Media outlets hailed their partnership as a beacon of hope, proof that empathy and action could bridge divides and transform lives. Together they appeared on talk shows, wrote op-eds and addressed crowds at rallies, spreading their message of empowerment and resilience. But despite the fame and recognition, neither lost sight of what truly mattered, the people they served. Whether visiting a struggling family in Detroit or attending a ribbon-cutting ceremony for affordable housing in Los Angeles, Mia remained grounded in the realities of poverty and hardship. And Jonathan, inspired by her example, continued to use his platform to advocate for systemic change. Years later, when historians looked back on the era, they credited Jonathan and Mia with sparking a movement that reshaped society's approach to poverty and inequality. Their unlikely friendship became a symbol of what could happen when privilege met perseverance, with compassion as the guiding force. As they stood side by side at a press conference marking the 5th anniversary of the program, Jonathan turned to Mia with a proud smile. We've come a long way since that diner, haven't we? Mia grinned, her eyes shining with determination. And we're just getting started. With those words, they stepped off the stage, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead, together. Because in the end, their journey wasn't just about changing lives. It was about proving that even the smallest acts of kindness could lead to extraordinary outcomes.